Got it. All right. This is a meeting of the CIP committee on March 30th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And the first item on our agenda is present to speak. If anyone from the public would like to talk. I don't see any virtual hands or actual video hands being raised. So I think we can move on. So approval of minutes. I did mean to go back to our last meeting minutes and make sure and do that at this meeting, but I didn't have time today to go back, and I didn't send it all out to you guys. I think they did go out. I mean, this was weeks ago, but I think they did go out into the public, but I think we have to wait to approve them unless you guys have all seen them. Mike?
I move we table the approval of minutes to a future meeting to be determined.
All right, I'll second that. Any discussion about that? Are you all ready to vote? All right, all in favor of tabling the minutes approval?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay. All right, it passes. So we'll wait till the next one. And I'll make sure, I'll check with Robin and make sure that we're all caught up to date next time we get together. And okay, so plan revisions based on the Board of Finance action. So Board of Finance met last week, did the final budget appropriations, not appropriations, but approval of what the budget would look like. That is now going to go to a public hearing, and then it will go to referendum. So Mike, do you want to just give a recap since you are our Board of Finance chairman? And
Oh, I don't have the notes. I don't have the notes with me because I just made the assumption that you had it ready.
Yeah, no, I have it. I did know.
Well, okay, so I'll just say that the Board of Finance did complete this phase of the process, as Christina said. We got through the what is called the appropriation or allocation phase, which really means that we decided what we believe is the right plan to present to the taxpayers. And that included some adjustments of what people had requested in other budgets as well as in CIP. And that brings us back here to tidy things up based on the Board of Finance decision making, and then all of it goes to the taxpayers.
Yep. Yeah. So really the biggest thing was that the capital reserve amount was cut by $100,000 with the recommendation or the idea of putting off the purchase of the dump truck that was in the plan for the first year, putting it off for 1 year, but also leaving in some money, putting in some money into reserve so that next year it's not a $225,000 hit. It's the money we're going to put 125 in this year, and then next year only need to put in 100 in order to purchase it. So basically that was the only actual cut that was made, unless I'm forgetting something.
Well, it was the cut in what was, that was the only cut in what was directly to the yellow box number of tax.
Yeah, right.
And then the other adjustment that was made was to take, to recommend 50,000 out of Fund 17, which I don't think is a CIP action in itself. Because I don't think CIP governs Fund 17 itself. But the idea of that was to put off the ambulance 1 year and use that $50,000 that would have been the ambulance payment instead for salary, because there was a big salary increase. There has been a big salary increase over the last few years, and the budget was looking at the beginning as being a 2.2 mil increase. So that was the way to make it affect taxation by bringing that $50,000 around to the, to reduce the salary for the ambulance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Donna, Donna, I see
Yes.
you. I see-
Hi, Christina.
Hi. You weren't here last week, but I don't know, have you been able to get caught up of all of this and made sense out of it on the sheet for us?
I did update the sheet. And I updated the transfer to the capital reserve by reducing it by $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ARPA projects that were funded after the public hearing by the commission, I noted that on the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
And that is as far as I got. So we can look at the spreadsheet and move out the purchase of the dump truck one more year, if
Mm-hmm.
that's the next step. And then the ambulance lease, move
Mhm.
that out 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And then
Can
the
I ask
other
a
thing I would
question?
say, the other thing I would say that we didn't talk about at the meeting is, but in theory, we talked about the idea of buying a truck every 2 years. So in that case, I think we should put money, like at least $100,000 into capital reserve every single year in the out years, so that when we get to year 3 or 4 or 5, we're still putting money in and we're still going to be able to stay on that schedule, because if we're going to replace these trucks every 10 years and we have 5 of them, then that's what we get. That's what we need to do every 2 years. So
Christina, we should also keep an eye on the effect of the money that was, that the board asked the selectmen, let's say the selectmen asked the Board of Finance to ask the selectmen to call a town meeting to take 350 from the reserve, also from the capital reserve, to do Moose Meadow Road.
oh, right. So that's
Which will make a big dent in the capital reserve, which, as Donna said, forecasting out is an issue, not in the coming year, but forecasting out will be an issue. So we have to keep an eye on that.
right. Erica has her hand up.
Yes, sorry, I apologize for not being on camera. I'm gonna spare you all my sick face. So I have a couple of big concerns. So those recommendations by the Board of Finance really alter this plan significantly. I will say right off the bat, I'm not in favor of not purchasing the truck. I think it's needed, and we have a truck in next year's plan. So are we gonna purchase 2 trucks next year, lease one and purchase one? I have concern about that, and the 2 trucks we're talking about, we've put significant cost into over the last couple of years and need to be replaced. And then I have real issue with using Fund 17 monies, taking away from the purchase of the new ambulance. I don't know how many of you are aware that for a couple of weeks now, the ambulance has been out of service, just came back into service today. Chief Moore is not on this call. He's currently working a 911 call. And so I wanted to ask him if he had some idea what the costs were. Last I knew, they were roughly $6,000. The longer we put off purchasing the ambulance, I believe it becomes a public safety issue. I know the fire department has asked ARPA for funds for a second ambulance. Don't know how long it will take them to find one that fits into their budget, but I'm just not in favor of us pushing off these big purchases currently. And it really, I'm concerned about the plan. So what I wanted to see from Donna is if she can show us how the capital reserve is affected, because it was Donna's recommendation that we take the Moose Meadow Road money from capital reserve, knowing that that's built into this CIP plan and not the general fund, and how Fund 17 looks if we were to keep that ambulance in this current year.
So Donna, can you share your screen and show us the updated chart?
I would like to respond to one thing Erica said. The fire department didn't just request money from ARPA. ARPA has approved money. So the fire department can be moving forward right now on buying the used ambulance to get their second ambulance. So that's their fastest way of getting their next vehicle, is getting because they can move now, money available now.
Absolutely, Mike, but the fire department came, so we're talking about two different committees, right? That make two different decisions. And while we're looking at a full picture, that doesn't, the purpose and reasoning for that second ambulance and the reason it was approved, I believe, by the ARPA commission was based on a set of circumstances. And now we're just exacerbating the issue by keeping longer and pushing out longer an ambulance we know has significant issues. It's had it since an accident it was involved in, almost immediately after getting. So to no fault of the department or on that purchase, it was as a result of an accident. But I don't think it's something we should be pushing out.
Hmm. I'm wondering, well, okay, let's talk about one thing at a time. Let's talk
Okay.
about the dump truck and the dump truck plan. So Donna,
Yes,
what is happening in so this is year one. So if year one,
Yes.
it's is that showing 225,000 coming off?
yes, coming out of the reserve fund.
Right.
So-
This plan isn't adjusted yet to what the Board of Finance had.
Right, I see. So if
looked
you,
at.
so if you reduce that by 100, but then what happens in 23, 24? Like when is, like
So
Erica was saying, there's another truck.
that's a good question because I'm looking, so Public Works is the orange and I'm looking for that other truck in the out years, right? And I don't see another truck,
Yeah.
anywhere,
Yeah,
Anywhere
line
in the-
19. Line 19.
line 19.
In the
Okay,
spreadsheet I
so-
have in front of me, it's listed in 23, 24.
So this is listing it in 24, 25.
Which is still not, it still would be 2 years of back-to-back buying trucks. Like there's, unless we move that one out too, which, I mean, I don't know, but one of these years we're gonna need to do back-to-back, it looks like. So it's either- Is that
So-
what you're thinking, Erica?
Right. So Donna, are you saying, and I apologize because the spreadsheet I have most current in my binder shows it still in year 2. And so Donna's showing us here in year 3. So that takes a little bit of concern away from me of having 2 in 1 year. But I have concerns from the Public Works standpoint of pushing this, the one that was planned for this year out another year. Can the reserve fund handle it in this year, Donna?
So we have it in for next year, 22, 23. Part of the expenditures of 280,000. Okay, let's just look and see what that is from the reserve fund. Okay, so it's just not looking right because we have, I'm seeing 280,000 of expenditures. And I think that was probably these. And how could it be 280? Okay, hold on. Let me just trace the number. Okay. Okay. make sure I'm on the first year, 280,000. Nope, 487, was looking on the wrong line. Okay, we have expenditures of 480,000 coming out next year. Okay, so the 487,000 are these 6 projects. Okay, let's go back up to the top. Here's the 487,000. Yep, I was in the wrong column. Yes, if we spend 487,000, we are now saving 245,000 instead of 345,000, getting $100 in interest. We have an ending balance of 375,000. Forecasted at the end of next year in the reserve fund.
Does that account for the request that we have for Moose Meadow Road? You had recommended we take it out of
And you
the
could
general,
take,
out of the reserve fund.
yes, because you have 2 places to take it, your surplus or the general fund, fund balance or reserve fund. So reserve fund at the end of the year will have 375,000. If you want to take 350,000 out, you'll have $25,000 left.
Okay, we were previously referring to that as capital reserve.
Capital reserve, yes.
That's the same as general reserve?
Yes. General reserve and capital reserve is the same.
Okay.
Fund balance or surplus is something different. That's Fund 1.
Right, okay.
Because
Gotcha.
your recommendation had been before, and it's what they moved on last week based on your recommendation from the week before, was to move the selectmen call a town meeting and appropriate the dollars from the reserve fund. So
Capital reserve. Yep,
Yeah.
reserve.
So
Capital
you're
reserve
saying
or
if
general
we
reserve.
leave the projects as they were in the original plan we approved, and the
Yes.
reduced amount of dollars put into the fund and money coming out from Moose Meadow, we can still maintain the rest of the plan?
Yep, let's do it. Let's just
So,
see what
well,
happens.
We have
Add
to
it
look
on.
at the forecast out.
Yeah,
Right.
let's look at the
years, too.
forecast out. So look, you're down to $25,000. Then the next year, okay, you're not spending very much, 27,000, because that's the assessor's reval. So we were kind of planning that way. We weren't going to spend much because we wanted to save.
Okay.
So then we have planned to add in 261,000. Now you have 260,000. Then the next year, we're spending 50,000. Not adding any money to it, we're down to 210,000. The next year, we're not spending anything, we're adding to it 288,000. So we have a balance of 498,000. The next year, we're not spending anything out of the reserve, we're adding to it 316, and we have 815,000.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a lot of unknowns in those out years tose, school things and all that.
Yes,
Right, and we may have to adjust that once we know what has happened. If the those of you who aren't on SBC will know that the recommendation from our owner's project manager has been that we could have a referendum as early as fall. And so that may show us which direction we're going in. So as we're building our plan next year, we can make adjustments because we will probably have a known either project or stay where we are.
I see Jen has her hand up.
Thank you. So what are the repercussions for lowering that fund so dramatically? Like if we go from 300 and something thousand all the way down to 25,000, is there any kind of hit that we'll take financially as a town, or is that just the cost of doing business? And because next year is really the only year that we can kind of forecast, as I don't remember who said it, but nothing is guaranteed after that. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any actual repercussions. It's just, it's kind of like your checking account. If you start to get too low, you just get a little worried that something could come up. But we have other sources that we could tap if we had to. Although like we are tapping the general fund now, 350,000 for this
we're-
unexpected road thing,
Right.
so.
Right, so
um,
like this, if we had another situation like what we have at Moose Meadow Road, instead of taking it from this fund, we'd be looking at the general fund as the place to take it, is what,
Which
how I
we're
would see it
already
right
cutting
now.
down to 10%, so we don't have a lot left. You know, we have to be careful with what we have left there also. Because
Yes,
the budget that the Board of Finance had finished last week puts the balance at 10%. And so that leaves us with, if we hit our lower end guidance of 8%, I'm trying to remember what the numbers were, Donna, it's 100 and some thousand, like it's around 100,000 per percent or something like that. I can't remember now, but there's probably a couple $100,000 of buffer before we hit the lowest that we really would want to see in that account.
it makes me nervous too, because the reserve fund, capital reserve or general reserve, is the town's savings account. And we're going to deplete it if we take out the $350,000. And it just makes me a little nervous. I just think we really have to be careful.
So Donna, I'm confused because you're saying today that you're nervous, but you told the Board of Finance that was an appropriate place to take it from.
That
I mean,
is, well, it's when you take it from there, you are depleting your savings account. So you could take it from there. You could bring your, it would just bring your balance down to 25,000.
So now I'm confused, I guess. So if we're taking out Moose Meadow, the stuff for Moose Meadow, that would be 616 minus the 350, right?
And the 487.
Yes.
so there were a couple of years in this plan we didn't look to put money into, or 1 year. We didn't look to put money into. Do we want to maybe adjust that in 2024?
I think so. I think we should be putting money into it every year. At least 100,000.
Is there another fund that that money can come out of for Moose Meadow Road? I thought there was money set aside. to do
So the general fund is the only other place to take it from. It's either the reserves fund or the general fund.
And that's already like in motion, right? We're gonna have a town meeting, right?
Yes, the plan is to do it at the annual town meeting.
So
Combine it.
So did we already, did the Board of Finance made a motion already, right, to take it? out of
Correct.
reserve?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's gonna happen when, it's just,
I think the risks of depleting the savings account are greater than the risk of delaying the dump truck 1 year. We have, I think in the last 3 years or the last 4 years, we've purchased, I believe, 3 dump trucks, right? 3 full-size dump trucks?
We've purchased dump trucks, but I'll agree to disagree, Mike. We put $30,000 into the current truck we're talking about. You're recommending pushing off. So I think we're just throwing, good money after bad. But, I would rather see us adjust the plan so that we're putting money into this fund every year. And we know we have a gap year there.
Well, again, I don't see We're talking about a dump truck when the taxpayers have funded 3 big dump trucks in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't see why we're saying we should run the savings down to save 1 year on another large dump truck. I agree it's needed. A lot of things are needed, but the Board of Finance put together a package last week for a reason. And that was, this was the way to end up not having a 2.2 mil increase. So the Board of Finance has already done the work with the input from the taxpayers. That's the process. And this is supposed to go now to the taxpayers. I don't see telling the taxpayers we're going to run the savings count down to $25,000 because we're not going to wait 1 year to replace a dump truck. I understand repairing the dump truck is expensive.
Yeah, I mean, we can agree to disagree on this. So I think we put together a good solid plan, and then the Board of Finance, suggested some significant changes to it. And I'm simply saying I don't agree with those. And this plan that goes to the townspeople and the CIP plan will come from ultimately from a recommendation from this group and then the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
I will definitely agree with you. I will agree to agree with you on the fact that we put together a plan as CIP, and I think it was a well thought out plan. And I think the selectmen put together a well thought out plan too. I absolutely agree with those things. But when we put it all together and tried to determine what the taxpayers, what the Board of Finance thought the taxpayers could afford, the plan had to change, just as it does every year in this process. Somebody's plans change.
You've currently got up there, assuming Moose Meadow comes out this year and the dump truck. Could I see what it would look like if we put the dump truck off a year and see what we'd have in the account? Can Donna do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Karen Ann, just so you know, what the Board of Finance had proposed was splitting it, so there would still be 125 of the dump truck in this coming year, and then the other 100 would come in the year after. So if that's what you're talking about, then it would move $100,000 essentially. Or if you
Okay.
move the higher purchase, it would still be bought at the same time, but the whole cost would fall on the next year, the further out year.
Okay.
So then we would have $250,000 in the reserve fund at the end of next year if we take the dump truck out. And if
So
we
dump-
put it, okay, and then if we put it in the following year, 23, 24. Let me just make sure it's there. Yep, it would be here, 225 plus 27. The expenditures next year would be 252. We have planned to add a transfer of 261,000, and then we'd have 260,000.
Well,
For
I can tell you if
balance.
it's next year, it can't be 225. It's going to be a lot more money than that. And we have that information already from a vendor. So I know Troy's on the call. If he wants to give us a little bit more information on that, we're looking at a significant increase in cost.
Can everybody hear me? Can I speak for a minute? It's Troy.
Yep.
Okay, so Mike, I just want to correct you a little bit on the one thing. So the first truck that was purchased was because there was no snowplow contractor that we could find. So that's one. And the other second big truck was Lou's truck this year. Other than that, there's no big trucks that have been purchased. We purchased an
Okay.
F-450 and a pickup truck for the director's spot.
Okay, so it's
that
just
truck-
two big trucks.
It's just two big trucks. That's it. And like Erica said, we put about $30,000 in that truck in the last year and a half or so, that we're looking to get replaced. And I understand the whole point of, we're back to back with trucks. I get that. Hopefully moving forward with the next person or whatever, that the plan sticks where, they replace these trucks on a 10-year cycle. But if that truck, it's going to give problems. We constantly have problems with it. And I would highly recommend that that truck gets replaced this year. You might be able to push out Jeff's truck next year or in 2025, I believe, or whatever it is for his truck is a 2015. So technically, I guess it should be replaced in 2025. So that gives you basically a year to save, and then you go back to buying another truck if you want to stick to the 10-year cycle. Other than that, I don't really know. I just wanted to make sure everybody realizes that only two big trucks were purchased, and one was purchased because we lost a snowplow.
Okay, thank you for that.
Troy, isn't there it expected that there'd be a trade-in?
Yes,
reduction?
that truck would be traded in. The gentleman from where we'd be purchasing the truck hasn't come down and give us a cost estimate on the truck yet. I know he's been trying to work with it. He wanted to make sure that there was still if the truck was going to get approved before he comes down and gives a quote and then holds it to it. But if that truck if it is going to go, I'll make sure and make a phone call tomorrow, and he will come down and give me an exact quote on what the truck would be to be replaced.
So is the 225 factoring in the trade-in cost, or is that before the trade-in?
No, currently with everything going up, the truck currently is the price right now is $249. So if you back that truck off another year, you're probably looking around $280, $290 for that truck the following year. So there is a big savings there. The cost with the trade-in, where he said the cost that went up $24,000 from the original price, he was to see what he was going to give us, but there was no guarantee without him taking a look at the whole truck completely before he gave a true price on that for a trade-in.
But do you think it's in like the 50,000 range, or is it in the $10,000
No,
range?
I'm probably in the $10,000 range. Probably. There's no way they'll give you $50,000 for that truck. No way.
Christina, do you
Mhm.
think we could go back to leasing it instead of purchasing it outright?
I guess that's a possibility.
What happens if you took that $125,000 that you're keeping and then lease out the rest of the truck? You're still saving that $100,000 this year. I mean, well, technically you're putting it in leases, but you're still, it's
You're
not.
saying pay some in cash and lease the balance?
Yes, correct. Yep.
We do that, Donna?
I suppose you could do that.
I mean, we determine what we're asking for funding, right? So.
Yeah, I guess what you could do then is you would take the, for example, if we kept the 125 in that we were already talking about, you could figure out whatever that first year's lease payment is. Let's just say, for example, it's $25,000. Then you could take the 100 that's remaining and make that your down payment. So you'd have 100 for down payment and 25 for lease for the balance, leasing the balance of the value of the truck, or the cost of the truck, I mean.
Mhm.
And there is can I make another suggestion too? Freightliner actually, they have a lease program now that they lease the trucks for 7 years. And then in the 7 years, you give the truck back. You would continuously have a payment, obviously, but something like that where you lease a truck and then 7 years, they give you a new dump truck and you continue on with a payment. There is an option there too, that can be broken down, whether the town wants to pay out so much every year and not own it, but at 7 years, they take care of all the maintenance. The only thing you do is oil changes, tires, you know, like preventative maintenance. Anything major that goes wrong with that truck in 7 years, they take care of. So there is other options too.
The other thing is we still have the excavator in this plan. And I don't know, you know, we don't, I don't know, Erica, if you think that whoever the next
Yeah,
director's gonna be, if they're gonna want that.
I would think so. I would be surprised if somebody else still didn't see the need for it. I look at the Moose Meadow Road work that needs to be done. If the guys had this particular piece of equipment now, you know, the work they could get started on and begin doing, I still think it's needed regardless of our Public Works Director.
So Erica, if, I mean, that's in there, I wouldn't advocate taking it out, but would you envision a situation where the new person comes on and says, hey, I've taken a few weeks to look around and this is how I particularly see we should do things. And it would be no judgment on whoever saw what way in the past, but maybe they envision a different set of priorities or whatever. And maybe remaking that project might change. Instead of being excavator, maybe they say, oh, we do great work with a bucket truck and we'll just contract out the excavator work or whatever it is.
Right. I don't, Mike.
imagine that's a
see that-
problem, right? Because they would just come to you and you would come to the Board of Finance and say, we're ready to move forward. We have this money in the plan, but we don't want to use it for an excavator. We want to use it for whatever.
Sure. So, you know, there's a couple things at play. I don't know how long it will take before we get someone new in here. And they'd have to give me a pretty good argument to sell me against what the evidence Troy has already presented, you know, to me to encourage this process moving forward. As we've looked at, you know, what we can do with this and not just, you know, hearing what Troy says and doing some, you know, research on my own and seeing the number of other towns that this is a typical piece of equipment. In other towns, Ashford has one and replaces it on a regular cycle. So someone, when they come in, would really have to give me a really good argument for why this piece of equipment wouldn't benefit us, as opposed to, you know, a bucket truck. So it's possible, but, you know, I believe the information Troy has provided us is what we need, even moving forward without him.
I wouldn't doubt that. My point was not about whether it's a good idea. My point was, do we need to envision anything right now if we have to change course? And I don't think we do, right? Like if the new person sells you on an idea and proves it out to you, then we could use that money for another capital purchase if there was justification. We don't.
Potentially, yes.
Yes.
So if
Okay,
before,
that's all.
between now and July 1, you know, something else were suddenly to drop from the sky, absolutely possible. And we revisit.
Right. Even after July 1, it still has to come back through, right? The new director has to have you send a request to the Board of Finance.
That's correct. But yeah,
purchase.
on some of these, we'd be
Right.
moving fairly quickly after the July 1 date. So be looking to hear from me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Christina, I'm not sure where we're going, but my feeling on this is the Board of Finance did what they're responsible to do and put together a package that made sense. And if, depending how we may or may not change this tonight, if it has to go back through, it throws the entire process off.
It doesn't, Mike. So what would happen is the Board of Finance's process is already done. This plan is you've adjusted the funding that would come from the taxable portion of the game, right? So you've already made those adjustments. Now we're trying to take a look at our plan to make sure that financially it fits into the cuts that the Board of Finance at this point has recommended. And if we can still make it financially fit, I say the things that were in this plan, I still feel strongly are needed in this next year. What I wouldn't want to see us do is spend another $30,000 next year in this truck because we pushed it off. If we can find another way to make it work, if we get creative, Troy just suggested we pay for a portion of it in cash and then lease a smaller portion of it. And if we can do that, I think it would be more beneficial to us, because I just don't know how we put another $30,000 into a truck like this. But it's too risky not to have a truck.
Okay, a fair point. I guess my point is procedurally, in the past, when the Board of Finance has recommended adjustments to the CIP plan, we didn't go back then and have CIP meet again and say, that's not what we want. As CIP, even if it wasn't what the CIP committee wanted or didn't want, the CIP plan was adjusted as was recommended by the Board of Finance, and it went to the taxpayers. So I'm not sure where we are procedurally.
Right. Well, I can tell you last year, the recommendation the Board of Finance made was that the 3 new vehicles in Public Works didn't get purchased. But the dollar amounts were still there. That's what you didn't adjust. And so we made adjustments based on within the Public Works budget to say, this is what we need. And the CIP plan was not adjusted. And what went to town meeting was approved was a plan that had those items. So your recommendation was to take money off this top line, capital reserve, and we can adjust that. That's, those are real dollars that affect the budget. The rest of the plan would stay in place unless we came back here and had this discussion. And that's what the Board of Selectmen would then put through to town meeting. And so what I wasn't comfortable doing was not taking a look at this and making sure all of these things fit in into a financial picture.
Okay.
Oh, Melissa, I see your hand up.
Yeah. So if we did go for a lease on the truck, would that help the situation instead of buying it outright? Or
What it does is it commits us to making payments in all the other future years.
Mhm.
But if we did a big down payment, then those lease payments would presumably not be huge. They but we don't have them in the plan right now, so we just Donna would need to put them in.
Can I just
And-
ask a question also?
Mhm. Sure.
So is this like new information, this whole lease process? Because that sounds like a pretty compelling thing to talk about, like a big upfront payment and then kind of spreading out the rest over the next few years. But like, it seems like it's like after, I don't remember the phrase, but like after hours, it seems like things have already been done. And now we're talking about a different way to fund something that everyone had already made a different decision about. I'm again, admittedly a newbie, but it seems like this conversation should have been had a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and you're right. Just so you know about leasing, we've traditionally, that's how we've been purchasing all of these big vehicles, and we've been trying to not do that because it does commit us to these huge payments, and they just keep adding up and adding up. And we had a couple of years here where we had a little bit of extra in the general fund, and so we just went for it to buy a couple things outright, and that definitely is, I think, an ideal way to go, and what we're hoping to do here, and that's the idea. But and we also save a lot of money in the financing costs, so it's just cheaper in the long run, which the long run isn't even that long, it's 7 years. So so yeah.
But well, I forgive the phrase hybrid, but this seems like kind of an ideal way to do it. If we have, half the money that we're committing to it, that still keeps us in a pretty decent financial position, and it still gets us the truck. And perhaps smaller payments, or I'm just concerned about the fact that we're talking about it at the 11th hour. That's the phrase I was looking for, the 11th hour. And it's just us sitting here talking about it. So that's
Right. Right. So if we went ahead with that idea, though, we would be changing the out years in the CIP plan, which the CIP plan has already been approved by the selectmen. Help me think that through.
So if we,
Erica,
if we now, we meet and make an adjustment to the plan, it's
Mhm.
a recommendation for this planned adjustment. And that would go before the Board of Selectmen on Monday night when they meet. And that's what would be then moved forward to town meeting, where the
Mhm.
plan would then be approved. And whatever bottom line comes out of the budget hearing on Tuesday and that final Board of Finance meeting after that would then be adjusted out of either capital reserve or the dollars into 930. Those would be adjusted in this plan. So those would be adjusted without the Board of Selectmen, really, because they're affecting the bottom line. But as far as the plan itself, it's the Board of Selectmen, typically based on the recommendation of the CIP committee. So
Right.
if we had done nothing, Jen, what would have happened is, unless the Board of Selectmen chose to take action and adjust the plan ourselves, which we could, we may not have done anything. And my feeling was I wanted to see this all laid out and have the committee take a look at some significant changes that were suggested by the Board of Finance.
All right, so Christina, are you to try a motion?
Okay.
All right, let's see if I can get this right. I move that we adjust the project known as 2023 Public Works Dump Truck with trade-in to be funded in the first year at $125,000 as a combination of down payment and lease, for a total of $225,000 for the project. Did that make sense?
Yes. The only thing that I would friendly amend to that is that some amount needs to be added in the future years for the lease payments for that truck.
Yes, and I
Yes.
have a friendly amendment that
Mhm.
there will be a lease payment next year that would come out of the Public Works budget. And that would be adding to the Public Works budget. So we'd want to maybe, whatever that lease payment is, so we have $125,000 that we can lay out in cash. Maybe some of that should be the lease. We should save some of that for the lease payment.
That was my
Where?
intent. That was my
Okay.
intent, how I worded it, but I didn't think
Oh,
about
okay.
crossing budgets. It does cross over budgets, you're right. But that was my intent. That's why I said as a combination of down payment and lease payment.
Got it. Okay. Yep. Now I
Can I
get it.
start discussion?
Can I second that so we can discuss?
Thank you, Erica.
You're welcome.
Good. Jen, you were gonna ask something?
Second with
I-
all the amendments.
I just wanted to know, okay, this isn't about the dump truck. How does this impact, there was conversation about the excavator earlier as well. Is that like, are we still talking about that? Or are we only talking about the dump truck?
We're only
What
talking
I-
about the dump truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the excavator next or is the excavator off the table?
It's just not this, it's not this conversation. It could be the next thing you bring up.
Okay, so I still am concerned about the process, and Eric, I get what you said, and I heard everybody else said on the committee. I feel like all of this stuff has been discussed, and I'm disappointed that this option wasn't brought up earlier so that it could be maybe more carefully thought about as it pertains to this year and next year and the year after that. I guess that's it.
So I'll comment that a little bit of support to the Board of Finance side, right? So the big change came from a Board of Finance cut in how much money we're putting into the capital reserve, and that they're looking at everything, all the budgets once they were put together, right? So when they were working with us, we have several members of Board of Finance on this committee. We're looking at this in a vacuum. And so the plan as it stood in the pockets of money we decided where everything would come from made sense in the plan that we agreed to. Once the Board of Finance got all of the budgets, they started to rethink maybe where money could come from. And I think that's why a new division of money is coming from, and it's coming out of a conversation happening here tonight. This could happen at the Board of Selectmen level and we could leave CIP out of it. I just didn't think that was the best way to do it. Because typically CIP will make their recommendation and then its Board of Selectmen could go in and make a lot of changes. It would be silly to not take some of the advice from our advisory committee. And that's why I had it brought back here. But I think once all of the budgets were together, and correct me, if I'm speaking wrong, Mike and Christina, but once you have everything together, it can give you a whole new outlook on the plan that we put together.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how we ended up making the cuts at the Board of Finance, because once we looked at the plan together, we saw that the effect on the taxpayers was going to be a 2.2 mil increase. And then we have to, I think we were very much in support of what we had put together for a CIP plan before. And the idea of growing the CIP plan, I think, is very important. Unfortunately, combined with everything else this year, and then having to take 350 for Moose Meadow Road, all of a sudden now when you put them all together, we have a new problem. So I would agree with you on that. I'm not sure that, I'm trying to remember if we batted around the ideas of leases for the dump truck before, but I do know we talked about worrying about the out years when we're going to be talking about school. And would we have a stack of lease payments and school bonding and fire station bonding and road bonding? I think that's where we're into.
We were trying to free up that money.
If we're talking about being concerned about the out years, though, I think it's optimistic to be able to put all of that money that we think we're going to be able to put back into the fund with all of those things that you just talked about. So yes. I feel like it's more important to figure out how it's impacting us today and next year, because those are really the times where we have some control over what's happening. Like if the school happens, if Moose Meadow Road were to happen again, like what are we going to do if we have $25,000 in our account and then can't replenish it the next year or the year after that? Like that puts us really in a bad position.
So Jen, I think we've gotten here from, I'm going to say us, meaning town, right? Lots of different people at the table pushing things off so many years, and some of them are coming to a head. And so we can't keep pushing some things off. And, this group is really trying to make some strong headway and getting us to build those things up as we plan for some things in the future. But, we'd have to take a look at a different way, at adding funds to some of these reserves, or a different way of bonding in the future.
So where we are, if this motion were to pass, that would put us in the situation that's halfway in between what we had before and what Donna last showed us. Because what Donna last showed us was moving the entire 225 out a year.
If we put 100 down and put 125 forward towards lease payments, leasing is always more than buying. Anybody have any idea what the lease payments would be and how many years they would last?
Donna, question.
It would last 7 years.
And how much every year, do you know?
No, I would have to look it up.
Well,
Okay.
we'd only be financing half of the cost of the truck. So that part would be good. We'd be financing like 100,000 instead of the 225.
Right, I understand that. It's just, like I said, everything I've ever seen, leasing always starts to add up.
Yeah,
Yes.
It does. And then Donna, let's say we make that adjustment and we add a portion of it in leasing. There is an implication into the public works budget that then I would request, right? That at the budget hearing, that be something we talk about, that potentially the Board of Finance increases that budget by that lease payments amount.
that was my next question, is how would we, Julie, how would we move that?
Because I think after the budget hearing, the Board of Finance can make adjustments to any of those appropriations up or down. Is that correct, Donna?
Yes.
And then my guess would then be by then we'd know what the lease payment is, and increase by that amount.
Can I just ask another question?
Mhm.
Kind of going back a little bit, but so the number $30,000 was referenced as far as us fixing the dump truck over the last year. So is the dump truck, I would imagine there's some expectation of proper working order if you've spent $30,000 fixing a machine. So is it fixed so that it's going to be good for a while, or was it fixed and then now it's broken again? Like, I just want to be clear about that part of it.
Or do you want to speak to the condition of it currently?
Is Troy here?
Yes, he's on the phone,
Oh, okay. I see.
the phone number.
I think we've lost him for the moment.
And then I believe there he is. Oh, no, multitasking.
Okay, what was that? Sorry.
Jen asked if the money that approximately 30,000 we put into it, I think she's basically saying, should that extend its life, or is there still significant other deficiencies with the truck? Is it still in
There's still
working
definitely-
order?
No, there's still definitely deficiencies. It's an international, and that's the year they put all the stuff for the emissions on it. So basically they've choked down the diesel with that motor. So when it idles, it has to regen all the time. We don't have the service like the computers to plug it in. We don't have a mechanic that can efficiently work on it. Some things are over Red's head. So there's a lot of things that are just wear and tear it's constantly being fixed. Where they're starting to have a little electronic problems with it right now. So it's not something that's going to prolong the truck. We're basically limping the truck along every time it goes out. So that's it. I mean, basically in the wintertime, that truck plows a route steady. And that's, yeah. So it's not prolonging the life of the truck. It's actually, it's just keeping the truck running for the meantime. Did that answer the question okay? Or did I lose everybody?
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Well, all right, so Mike has a motion on the table. Did anybody second it?
Erica seconded
I
it for
did.
discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so
So-
yes, we've been discussing.
So I guess if we went forward with this, we would have to figure out how that whatever the amount that became the lease would move. It would have to move somehow in the budget to essentially refill Public Works for making the payment.
Right?
And
So
the idea that I was presenting was that money would come from the money we're putting in capital, but I guess we just have to figure out what that would look like. Would we just reduce? We don't know what that number is either.
right, let's say we put 100 cash to the truck, and then if 25,000 is enough for a lease payment, if that would get us through. And so
It should
In
be more than
theory,
enough.
I would think, or we could adjust how much cash we gave depending on what that looked like. And so for purposes of this committee, that could be the recommendation of the adjustment of the plan. And then when the Board of Selectmen take a look at it on Monday, we can have Donna, hopefully by then can have some actual figures in that plan that express the recommendation made by this group. And then the concrete numbers will be in there.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's how we would decide, or that's how the budget would decide how much money moves and where it moves to once the number was figured out.
Yeah. And then I would say during the budget hearing, I would probably speak and say, I would recommend you increase this because of this. And then at your meeting
Right.
after, you could take action.
Right. And then we would just, where it goes up there, it would go down somewhere else probably, or something to make up for it. I mean, it wouldn't.
Yeah, I would think.
It just moves where it affects taxation from one place to another. It doesn't actually increase taxation.
I would say no, Mike, because the only number that's affecting taxation is the cash amount we're suggesting putting into the capital reserve.
Right.
And that's not what we're adjusting. So it would actually be a slight increase in the public works line item.
Right.
Sorry, I keep talking, but I know that we're talking about affecting taxation, but that's not I don't feel like that's the only concern. Like I keep beating this drum, and I'm sorry about that, but like anytime you deplete a fund, there's nothing there to reach into in case of an emergency. And as a townsperson, I would feel like that is almost as much of a concern as the amount of taxes I pay. So that's it.
Oh, sorry. I think this would split the difference.
I agree, and I think that this is a good compromise. I guess that's the end of the sentence. Yep.
Okay.
Or maybe this, I hear your concern, Jen, but this coupled with adding some to the year where we weren't putting any money into the fund could keep us from completely depleting. So we're taking less now. And then a year where we weren't going to put any, if we were to add something there in another potential motion, that might help us from completely depleting that fund or getting close to.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Mike.
Aye.
Karen Ann. Aye. Okay. Melissa.
Aye.
Jen.
Aye.
Erica.
Aye.
And I don't think, is that it?
So-
Who's on the call? Oh, me. Aye.
Oh, you.
All right, so all in favor. So basically that that advice will get forwarded on to the Board of Selectmen, and they can approve a new plan. Anything else we need to do, Donna? The next thing, the ambulance.
Yes, the ambulance. So now we have the lease for the dump truck, less the $100,000 down. And we have the lease for the truck for Wellington Hill and the lease for the ambulance next year.
Okay, and the lease for the ambulance would be coming out of Fund 17.
Yes.
Okay, and Fund 17, can you show us what it looks like right now? Because I know we're taking a lot out of it for the salaries this year. That makes
Yes.
me nervous.
Yes.
Ditto. Be very nervous.
So every year it's been $10,000. That's been the tradition. So this year, next year coming up, it's going to be 60,000. And where's the other 12,500 coming from?
That was money from what the
Union?
town of Union is giving the fire department that they're going to turn over.
So that is going to be revenue from town of Union. Okay.
It was 13, I thought. 13,000?
It was 13,000, but Mike, remember
13.
Alex had some questions about the number, and what I tell you, I found out since, remember we adjusted it because he thought the number that he gave, what didn't match what had been on that
There was a
sheet.
$500 adjustment.
Correct.
Yes.
And
yes.
Tish, Donna, and I didn't have this conversation. Tish and I did on Friday. I believe, and Donna can speak to it, that they found calculation error in Alex's line, so they adjusted it. Is that correct, Donna?
Yes.
So
So
Donna's
that's the
number was right.
500.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so for Fund 17, we have forecasted at the end of next year, $145,000.
And is that 50,000 that the Board of Finance had put forth, is that already subtracted?
No, that's not subtracted.
So if that, as the Board of Finance put forward, was subtracted, it would go right there at the, you know. Okay.
Hold on, did I put it in the right way? Minus. I think I did. Yeah, I think I did. Okay, so I just thought it was 145 before. Now it went to 195, and I was thinking it was going to go less. So let me just put it down here. So
Yeah, maybe instead of a minus, you needed a plus.
I think I did, because the 50,000 extra, let's just put it down here. This goes to an expenditure of 330,000 in 22-23. So I think I needed to put a plus here,
Yeah.
because I was putting it, yep, there's the expenditure, 330,000, then you're down to 95. So you're okay. That's not bad.
And what is the ambulance lease payment?
So
And
we
that-
have, yeah, we have that figured at,
48 something.
yes, 48,638. And we have $12,000 figured for it's called the first response vehicle. That's down here.
Mhm.
Anna, can I just ask a quick question? It's Alex.
Hello, Alex.
Are you planning to lease both of them together, the service truck and the ambulance?
Yes, one lease
Okay.
for both.
Okay. So what we don't know is when we'll be able to do the lease, because we don't know how long it'll take for the vehicle. So if we can hold that off, would that help until, September, January, or is it just, it doesn't matter?
Just trying to think that through.
We have it in for one payment or two.
I think we have it in for 2 payments.
So are you suggesting, Alex, waiting till halfway through the year so that it would
So
only be?
the last we got told is we can't even order a chassis until after September. So the hope is that our department's hope is to just remount our truck, which will come in it'll come in less than the 300,000. We just don't know how much less. But if we can't order till at least September, I don't know. We would have to order as quick as we could. I just don't know if it makes sense to try to do it as one payment or two.
Well, I think I would keep the 3 vehicles on one lease.
So which three vehicles are those? That's the SUV, the ambulance, and what else?
The dump
And the
truck.
dump truck.
The dump truck.
That just makes sense to me.
What are the fees? What's the fee impact by keeping them all together? What's the benefit?
Or we may get a lower interest rate because we're borrowing more money
Mm-hmm.
and we're only doing it once. We're only going out to lease once. And so it's, one document fee. The attorney reviews the closing documents. And so it'd be just one set of closing documents to review. And one lease to prepare versus two
Or three.
or three.
So what kind of financial impact are we talking about? $1,000 or $10,000 or what?
Probably about $1,000.
Okay, so definitely helps you on the workload side, saves a little bit of money. But then what you're doing is if the ambulance is really held up, then you are holding the truck and the SUV because the ambulance is held up.
Oh. And I'll use the example, Mike, this year we purchased 3 public works vehicles on one lease. We're still waiting for a build date for the third one.
Oh,
So
so
we were
you
able
did
to borrow
you,
all the money.
okay, so you do the process all at once.
Yeah.
Okay,
We went ahead and ordered, and then it was just, we're still waiting for a vehicle to be built at Ford a year later. So, yeah.
Is anyone concerned about there only being $95,000 in Fund 17 though at the end of the year? Like that just seems like a low number. I don't know if we've ever been that low.
I
And
don't
then
think
what?
so.
And then what we don't know is next year, are we going to need to take more than 10,000 for salaries again? And we don't know if this is payments a one-time thing or if it's going to be an annual
Right.
thing.
right.
Have we ever taken $50,000 like we did now in salary?
I don't think so.
So
Not
that's,
that I'm aware of.
That's kind of a whole new program and way of looking at it, and a faster way of depleting that fund, which my understanding, and the firemen in the room, and Christina, you worked on that contract, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the intent originally, and I know that can change, was to, purchase the fire apparatus with those things. If we start adjusting to, taking salaries out of it, I know Alex has talked to us about, the hope is that we'll be getting a little bit more with this new Medicare, Medicaid.
Right.
I always get them wrong. But I mean, it concerns me only because if it becomes a trend to take money for salaries out, then I think it's a real problem.
Well, and keep in mind, it is in the contract that it says it can be used for salary. That is one of the intents.
Right. But I'm saying it's a new way of thinking, and we just haven't based a plan around actually using it for that significant amount of money. And so we'll have to rethink, our purchasing of things and requests from fire departments if we continue the trend of taking that much, more than the 10,000 we were typically taking.
Right. So Chief, or I don't know if it's appropriate to be asking a submitter questions at this point, but here's my question for the group and maybe for the chief is, well, I already know the answer. Everything's a priority. I mean, if we were to go forward sooner, the idea was to push out the new ambulance 1 year because the ARPA approved money to buy a second ambulance. And if based on all these impacts and the costs, could we dull the effect on the budget by trading in Well, I guess if you did a re-chassis on the current box, you don't have much of a trade-in because the old chassis would be almost worthless.
Correct. And the numbers that, the preliminary numbers without anything actually in writing.
Yeah.
Gets us around the 250,000 mark to do a re-chassis. But I don't know that till I can actually put it out to bid.
Right. So
I think
now what about trading in the used ambulance you're gonna buy when the new one comes in? What about trading in that used ambulance to help bring down the cost?
Because I don't have any idea what we're getting. I couldn't even put a number at that. Or
Well, what about the idea of it?
so it all depends on what we can get. If it's something decent that doesn't have any mechanical issues, we're gonna try to hold it as long as we can so that when one truck is out of service, we're not out of service.
So the goal really is to have 2 ambulances.
Yes, yep, and that was what we presented at CIP.
Yep, it's evolved. Let's be honest, it's evolved. This started as the first
Well,
ambulance. We need another one to hold us over. And then it was, we're missing out on billing, and now it's to have 2 ambulances. So, and I'm not trying to say that to pick on you. I'm just saying this has evolved over time.
right, and we did not.
Is it
expect
program
her to-
expansion? Or, as we're trying to figure out where to come up with all this money, are we coming up with money to keep you in business or for program expansion?
to keep us in business and to keep Fund 17 growing.
But that presupposes that this new used ambulance isn't gonna work. Like, we'd hope it would work if we're just buying it. I'm just not
Well,
sure.
Madam Chairperson, what are we gonna do?
Well, I mean, so right now, it's still in the recommendation came from Board of Finance to move it out. But the funding, it's not, if we do it, or if the Board of Selectmen do it, it doesn't really matter to the bottom line as far as the Board of Finance is concerned. So.
Right, what matters to the bottom line was the $50,000,
Right,
which reduced the salary cost,
right,
which reduced taxation.
right, right, and that we can't change. So all we can do is make a recommendation, I think. And I'll make a motion that we should recommend that we move the purchase out for 1 year as recommended by the Board of Finance.
Second,
Any discussion about that?
Yeah, I'll state the same thing I said earlier. I think having a functioning ambulance, a new ambulance, is a matter of public safety. And the reasoning given to the ARPA Commission on that second ambulance were not predicated on a new ambulance down the road. There was, that was a second ambulance, and there would be some help. I would hope that second ambulance could bring some income into Fund 17. And there'd be the possibility of it being on the road so that we don't have any gaps. But I would not be in favor of pushing the ambulance out, especially knowing the time frame it can take to get something.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna ask. You're already talking about not even being able to order if we do it this year till September. If we push it back a year, how backlogged is it gonna be next year? I mean, we all know the automotive industry's got issues right now. I mean, if we say we're pushing it out a year, could it possibly be 2.5 years before we actually see that ambulance?
Maybe.
Can I make a comment on that, or do you?
Sure.
One, as far as we're told right now, if we do a remount and buy the chassis, we're looking at the end of 2023, 2024. If we place the order in July, they can order the chassis in September for an F-Series chassis. If we were to do, like Mike had said at one of the Board of Finance meetings, of, you know, lowering the truck to an E-Series or a gas series, something like that, two of the vendors have also told us that we're looking at late 2023 right now to get a truck, because they're closing the E-Series. They've already closed the F-Series production, and they're going to close the E-Series not far after that. So we're looking 23, 24.
So, but when would the payment actually be made? Like in the
Mike,
beginning?
I don't know that until
Toward
we
the
do a
end.
contract. I don't know. So I had another suggestion or idea of if the $50,000 is going to come from payroll out of Fund 17. What about asking ARPA for the first payment for the new ambulance? So that it doesn't come off Fund 17, you're pretty much equal. And let me ask ARPA if they'll give me 50 or for the 48,000 for the pay for the first year.
I see the logic in that. The problem is there's only about $300,000 left in ARPA, and there's probably $1 million worth of other ideas in town for what to use ARPA for too. So,
Like I said, it was just a suggestion.
yeah,
Right.
I'm just
Right.
not sure where.
And
I'm
if
not
you
sure
push
where
off,
the best place is.
yeah, and while I think that may sound good, Alex, if we start using ARPA to offset things that we should be typically funding and planning for, it's a little bit of a slippery slope.
I agree. It was just a thought.
Mm.
There's nothing else projected in the next year to come off Fund 17 other than what's built now, correct? Donna, you already had those calculated in.
Yes.
With those calculated in, I'm comfortable with Fund 17 going down that low. We don't have anything else, knock on wood.
But what about next year? What if there's another big salary increase in that line? What if
By the contract currently, there's a 2%, I believe it's a 2% increase this year. Not the jump that we had. There, the 50,000 was because of a jump, because we couldn't hire anybody.
Mhm. Okay.
Regardless, even moving the ambulance out, if we were to move an ambulance out 1 year, the fund wouldn't be sustainable for long if we kept doing 50 or 60,000 a year for payroll. We would have to find another funding source.
Right.
I had a thought, but it just left my head. All right, so I guess we can vote on this. And the selectmen can change it if they want to, I guess. Is there anything else anybody wants to say before we vote? No. All right, Mike?
What was the motion again? Was to put the
The
ambulance out
motion
here?
was to push it out a year.
I really have mixed emotions about this.
Yeah, I actually do have a question for Donna before we vote.
Yes.
Because, so when we normally order the trucks and the ambulances, do we have to, when do we pay? Do we pay
Yep.
up front, or is it half up front? Like when does the money actually come out of the account?
Okay, so you can have two choices on your lease payments. You can set it up that you pay on the day you close on the lease and you get the money. you make your first lease payment.
Mhm.
Or you could structure the lease for payment in arrears. And that means you can make your first payment 6 months later after you close on the lease. The payment in arrears is more expensive because you're paying interest for 6 months that you're not paying if you pay when you close on the lease. So I always make the first payment the day we close on the lease.
Mhm. And like, for the purposes of this, it's not really a lease because it's being built. It's more of a loan, like,
Yes.
we're thinking about it that way. So you get the loan and then,
And you put it in an
Alex, and
escrow
then-
account.
but Alex, like, when he signs the documents and says, yes, this is exactly what the chassis we want, this is, all the things. That's when they say, okay, give us the first lease payment before we start building it. So theoretically, that could happen in July, or it could take a while and not happen until September, but it doesn't matter because it's all still in that same fiscal year.
I know for the ambulances, I don't think we've paid until we've received the truck.
I
Okay,
know the public
You
works
pay
trucks, we
the
just did with the
vendor.
same thing. We paid the
Mhm.
vendor.
You pay the vendor when you receive the truck, but you pay the bank for the money you borrowed. Start making your payments as soon as you borrow the money.
okay.
So I don't know, because I guess I have to say this. I feel like I'm in a tough spot. I am 150 million% against the idea of 2 ambulances. I do not think it's good for the town. I think it's just lining us up for more expenses. I don't believe the idea that this is not a new program because now the maintenance will be split between the two. I don't buy any of it. I think 2 ambulances is a terrible idea. I am absolutely against it. But now I'm in a position here where I would have to vote against purchasing a new ambulance, which I don't believe is the right thing to do either. So I guess congratulations, whether this was engineered or not, or just brilliant good luck. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have to support ordering the new ambulance because I think a new ambulance is the right thing for the town. I hate it because I think the idea of 2 ambulances is a bad thing for the town. I think it's just going to line up more expenses. It's going to end up us doing more work for other towns. I don't think it's a good plan. But it doesn't seem we're going to get a deal to do a trade on the new ambulance, to trade the second one in. It seems the fire department is determined to have 2 ambulances. And so that leaves me in this position. So I have no choice but to support the new ambulance, but I would like to see this current one traded in. So I guess for this motion, I'm going to vote no on delaying it.
Okay. Let's see, Karen Ann?
Yeah, I have a problem with how long it is that it's gonna take to get this new one anyway, so I don't want to push it back a year, so no.
Okay, Melissa? No, can't hear you, Melissa.
Sorry, no. No.
No. Okay, Jen? Oh, you're muted, Jen.
It's a good thing I didn't say anything. I was pausing. The motion is to delay it, right? To put it off a year.
Yeah,
I vote yes.
okay. Erica
No,
and that
Just
leaves
you,
me.
Christina.
Just me. Well, I'm gonna vote yes, because I just feel like it would work out. But still it doesn't pass. So I guess the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen is to leave it in the plan for this current year. And I
Well, if we
mean,
take, if we take no action, the plan stays as we already
plan-
approved it.
yeah, yeah. Um,
So then if I recall, then the only adjustment we made is the one for the public works vehicle. And
Mhm.
then the adjustment Donna has already shown on the plan for $100,000 less into the reserve fund.
right. Right. And then I guess technically the ARPA stuff that has, since we started making this plan, it was approved by ARPA. I think it still should stay in the plan, just so we, are watching that stuff too, but,
Yeah, I agree. It's within this 5-year period, so I think it's a good way for taxpayers to see it. So they'll see
Yeah.
no real dollar amount adjustment, in the CIP plan, but they can see all the items that were done.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Christina, because that was in my notes. I had a question on that. For planning purposes, you're gonna kill me for this, but should we take anything that ARPA approves that's capital and show it in the CIP plan, but funded by ARPA?
Yeah, that's what I think.
As a town, that way it's a townwide planning tool.
Right, that's what I think.
Oh, but I guess I have issue with that part, Mike, because ARPA has already approved it. So if, let's say the plan wasn't approved at town meeting, those items are already approved
Mhm.
and done. So it's showing it, but
Let's
it's not
address
part of
this.
an approval.
So let's address this after this budget cycle. Maybe when we meet after July 1 for whenever we meet after July 1 for CIP, we can talk about just maybe we put a separate section in the CIP plan that is sort of an FYI section or whatever. And it'll be after this is approved this year, so we don't have to worry about messing up the approval, because I think your point is good on that, Erica. But let's maybe talk about tracking it somehow in the future so that when we are looking at our capital plan, we see these capital expenses. No action on it tonight is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I think that's where we're at. So Donna, do you have everything you need? Are you
Yes,
good?
I'm good. I'm gonna rework the plan tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the
It's-
selectmen will get it on Monday.
Yes,
And then the hearing is on Tuesday, right? Okay, is it that fast?
Yeah, the 5th.
Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah, so,
And then once the selectmen do their approval of the, if they accept the change or make any additional changes, then that would go to the annual town meeting.
mhm.
Yes, because I'll be sending out tomorrow the 2 agendas for the 5th, the one for the budget hearing and the one for the meeting to follow right after.
All right, so I don't think we have anything else to talk about then. Is everybody good? No other, anything to add? All right. So I guess with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
thank
Have
you,
a good night.
Christina.